Hello, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about the Grisha Verse, which is a young adult fantasy trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. The first book is Shadow and Bone. And again, it is a trilogy, so there's 3 books. However, there are a handful of intermediary novellas. So if you get to the end of the trilogy and it's just not enough for you, you can go back and read those, or you can read them in between. It's not necessary for the plotline of the main trilogy to read the novellas. So if you're not feeling it, you can totally skip those. If you are feeling it, though, there is extra to read if you feel like it. So these are a young adult fantasy series set in basically a mystical version of Russia. The author never comes out and says this is Russia, but you'll notice that there's like onion domes on their architecture. Their language is Slavic based. They say da when they're, meaning yes. The names are very Russian sounding. This is what I would call a chosen one book, which what I mean by that is think of like Harry Potter, where you've got some downtrodden underdog who, up until this point life has been pretty underwhelming. And suddenly they find out that the fate of the entire world or country or whatever rests on them. That's what this book is about. So you follow a young orphan girl who, when she's about 18, discovers a power that she didn't know she has, and it could be the thing that this country needs to save themselves. So Grisha are magicians, for lack of a better word. They consider it a science. So you've got like alchemists, and you've got people who can heal, and people who can use basically healing powers as a weapon. You've got people who can control wind and fire. And then the person who's in charge of this entire army of magicians is called the Darkling, and he controls darkness and basically discovers this power that the orphan has, snatches her up, and is like, we're going to train you up to be the saving grace of this country. So it follows her along as she learns from the Darkling and becomes his protege and tries to kind of discover who she is now with this newfound power. The pacing of these books is, I would call, kind of measured. You have a chapter where it's going to be some character development and more into her training, so world building, that sort of thing. And then the next chapter, something explodes, and so there's a bunch of action, and then you'll go back to some more character development or a flashback in her past, that sort of thing. So it's not action packed, but there's enough actions kind of sprinkled throughout to keep it feeling like it's action packed while also giving you really good world building and really good character development. So I wrote down that I considered it compelling and engrossing with a more measured pace. So if you look on Novelist, it describes these books as having lush description, and I would wholeheartedly agree with that. The description in these books is very lush, super vivid world building. But like I said, they do break it up with some action and some other things happening to keep it feeling more faster paced. For characterization, there are really 3 main characters. There's the main character who's telling the story. There is the Darkling, who is she's his protege. And then there's her best friend. And the story really revolves around these 3. I mean, the main character especially. But the 3 of them really get some pretty good character development. And the rest of the characters are kind of just shadows, if you will. They're silhouettes of people. And I didn't personally mind that because I got really good character development with the 3 main characters. But if you're someone who wants good character development across the board, this is probably going to be disappointing. If you want enough character development where you have a couple of characters that you really care about, who you can really identify with, and the rest you could kind of take it or leave it. This will be good. That's exactly how this book is. The main character and her best friend are developed in kind of flashbacks to their childhood, and then also as they're learning and progressing currently in their lives and their training and everything. So the main character is very introspective. She's the one telling the story. It uses I statements and me. And the main enemy ends up playing some pretty serious head games with her later on in the series. So it's really interesting. The story being told from her perspective is a stroke of genius, because I feel like a lot of her mental struggle would be lost if it was told from a third person narrator. So she's the one telling the story. You get a lot of psychological struggle with her as these head games are being played with her. And she's just at some points like not sure what's right and what's wrong anymore. Who's on the good side, who's on the bad side, you know, where her place is in this world and the war that's going on. So the storyline is tragic, but not in a overwhelming way. So we talked before about gentle or cozy mysteries, where they're mysteries, but without any like sex or explicit violence or anything like that. And I would consider these a cozy fantasy. There's no, I mean, it's war, so you know that people are dying and that sort of thing, but there's no graphic details. No swearing. I mean, maybe in this made-up Slavic language there's swearing, but no actual swear words, and no sex, nothing like that. So I consider the story kind of more gentle, because while it's like a gripping story, there's no carnage, if you will. Her life is very tragic. I mean, it starts out with her at an orphanage at like age 8 or something, and it just kind of continues along in that vein for a long time. There are a lot of plot twists in this. For a long time, you're just honestly not sure who's a good guy and who's a bad guy, and people keep reversing sides, and you find out people are spies, and so layered. It's got a pretty decent layered plot. So I wouldn't consider that the main theme of it at all. But if you like, you know, a little bit of espionage and intrigue mixed in, this definitely has some of that. The frame and tone, the frame is this really detailed background of this mystical version of Russia. And I think it was a true stroke of genius by the author to have Russia be a spring off point, because you get this immediate picture in your mind of what this country is like without the author having to go into excessive detail. So there is a lot of world building, but a lot of it is done in your own head, if that makes sense, because there is detail given, but not, I would say, on the same level you would expect given what a vivid image you have, because you are picturing this like medieval Russia where witches and wizards, I mean, they're not called witches and wizards, they're called Grisha, but where magic is alive and people are still using like horses and carts, and that is all immediately auto-filled in your head, basically, just because the author is like, we're going to draw on Russia. So that is the background, that's the like frame of this book. And then the tone is really, really bittersweet. I feel like every victory the main character has is either won by somebody's death or a major sacrifice on her part. So you're never really truly happy about what's going on, which, if you just want like a feel-good book, probably not the book for you. But if you are interested in something where the fight feels a little more realistic because nothing happens easily, that's definitely the case here. The author also does a really good job of, without making this a suspense novel or a suspense series, throwing in some really scenes of suspense and foreboding. I mean, the first few pages is a prologue of her and her best friend when they first get to the orphanage. And that cuts off like in the middle of the scene, and it now is present day. And she's getting ready to go into, not battle, but battle for lack of a better word, in the army. And there's just this building suspense where she's talking about how like she knows tomorrow's not going to go well, and she's got a really bad feeling about it. And I feel like that is something that really, for me at least, adds depth to the story, but it's not to the point where I would be like, this is a suspense book. If you really want suspense, it's not like that. It just adds another layer to the story. So if you really want a suspense book, you're going to be disappointed. But if you don't mind having a little bit of that kind of sense of foreboding and like, ooh, what's going to happen? There are definitely scenes in here like that. So that's the Grisha Verse. And again, it's a trilogy. The first book is Shadow and Bone. The font's kind of hard to read on this, but Shadow and Bone, and it's by Lee Bardugo. And there is 2 sister books that are set in that world, but have completely different characters and a totally different storyline. That's the Six of Crow. I don't think it can really be called series since there's only 2 books, but the Six of Crow series, for lack of a better word. And I'll probably be doing a video on that really shortly. So if these sound interesting, there are more books by this author set in this world, but with completely different characters and a completely different storyline. So just something to keep in mind. So before I sign off, I just wanted to ask, what are you guys reading? What do you love about what you're reading? Or what do you not love? What do you hate about what you're reading? Why? Tell us about it. Feel free to comment below. I'd love to hear what you guys are reading. All right, until next time, happy reading.